Hello and welcome to the Two Man Power Trip of Wrestling. I'm your host, JP John Paz. With me today, very special guest, a legendary promoter and wrestler, former NWA Florida World Heavyweight Champion, former AWA Southern Heavyweight Champion, Continental Heavyweight Champion. He is the Tennessee stud, Mr. Ron Fuller. Mr. Fuller, welcome back. How you doing?
Well, thank you very much. Glad to be on there, John. Good to see you again.
Great to see you. What have you been up to? What's going on in your world?
Oh, Jace, man, a lot going on actually. Kind of moved in the last 6 months out of Florida back to Tennessee. Living in the Smoky Mountains. It's been a long time since I lived, about 20 years since I lived in Tennessee. So it's really been nice being back here. We've had a couple of snows in the last week, which is, it's always nice it's pretty. I like the snow every once in a while, and got a lot of going on. I have a new YouTube channel that run a lot of my wrestling shows off of the old shows, Continental shows, Southeastern shows, USA TV shows. So I've got quite a bit going on as usual.
Nice. Are you going to visit Dr. Tom Pritchard in the Smoky Mountains? He's up in that area.
Oh yeah, yeah. He lives over there in Knoxville, and I've been to see him several times actually since I've been here.
Wow,
Good
nice.
guy, Tom. Really good guy.
Nice, very cool. Kind of connecting with some old Continental guys. Very cool.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I get to see a few guys. Dirty White Boy's still in this area. There's quite a few guys in this area that wrestle with Continental. Some of them with Southeastern even. USA guys. Not as many around as there used to be. That's
Right.
a sad thing, but yeah, there are still a few up in this area.
What's going on with the Studcast, the podcast?
Yeah, still doing the podcast. Actually, I did number 233, 233rd episode came out today.
Wow, nice.
So yeah, I've since the day I started with my granddad. I've worked all the way through my dad, and I'm actually in my Southeastern Wrestling, the first company that I ever started, Southeastern Knoxville. I'd started it in 1974, and I'm up to about 1978. Kind of doing, I guess, something unusual. I don't know how many podcasts do what I do, but I take each week of my territory back 44 years ago, right now, since it's 2022, we're talking about 1978. So I'm back 44 years ago talking about the actual cards from this same week 44 years ago, and then I talk about the TV to promote the cards, and and I actually have I'm starting a second territory back in 1978 during this time frame, the one in Pensacola. So got a lot going on in Studcast too.
That is pretty cool. I don't really think many shows, if any shows, do that where they go through, in chronological order weekly. Definitely not, which is great.
Yeah,
Very cool.
yeah, probably. I know it's a lot different than most people. Most people do it, and I kind of enjoy it. It takes me back. I do my research, and every time I go back looking at the cards and the TVs and things like that, geez, it's kind of like it's like revisiting, man. In fact, my YouTube channel is called Southeastern Rewind, so I rewind every week when I do a
Yeah.
studcast. That's another rewind, basically. I put even the studcast onto my YouTube channel too.
Did you find anything that you've forgotten? Like, oh my God, I forgot we did that angle or forgot he
Oh
wrestled there.
yeah,
Like,
yeah, I come across that quite a bit. Yeah, you mean when you've been in it, I was in it for like 18 years, and producing wrestling shows, and I had a lot of different talent and a lot of different four different wrestling companies. So it's I have to do the research. Luckily, I've got all the old cards and all the old TV formats, and I have the stuff that I can sit down and I can piece it back together, pretty darn close to what actually happened all those years ago.
you have all like your old notes and stuff?
Yeah, I have some notes. Yeah, sure
Wow.
do. I have notes that I used to make for shows prior to shows, and and then angles and all the things that we used to do back in the day. And I've been pretty lucky to have kept a whole lot of stuff that helps me pretty good, probably pretty close to what actually happened. And I feel real comfortable about it, and fans seem to really like it. I got a pretty good audience.
Yeah, definitely very loyal audience. I know you moved recently too, right? You kind of moved the Studcast.
Yeah, yeah, sure did. Yeah, we moved to Studcast. Move. We don't do. I'm not doing a super Studcast. I haven't done a super Studcast in a while. But I'll probably get back to doing those as well. But yeah, the guy that does it for me now is a company out of Alabama, and he's a co-host with me. Does a real good job, and no, I think fans are real happy with it. I mean, obviously, I got numbers say that they got a lot of people that are listening and enjoy it.
Which is great. That's like the old school fans that they don't really care what's going on in today's wrestling. They want to relive the glory days and the good days and the old school days of wrestling.
Yeah, I mean, you see the stuff today. It's pretty hard to watch some of it. It's changed so dramatically. It's a shame. It's really sad. That it is where it is today. But you know, and then I think a lot of the new fans. I think they enjoy seeing some of the old stuff, and they probably learn a whole lot of different things than what they learn nowadays.
Do you watch any current wrestling? I know you said it stinks and it's not really as good as it was, but do you try to watch it at all? You can't even stomach
No,
it.
I really don't. Haven't watched a show in probably maybe 20 years since I watched any wrestling. Uh,
Wow.
other than the stuff that I do and the shows that I go back, I've been able to. I run a lot of my actual shows from back in those days. Back Southeastern. I've only started running one Southeastern. I've had one Southeastern show, but I have run 24 USA television shows that we did in 1988, and Continental. We've got the first, I think, 12 shows from Continental that started in 1985. But I have all of them ready to go, and they're all in order and in sequence, so that fans, when they watch it, what made wrestling work back in those days is your storyline. And so my television is in the exact sequence it was when it was produced, so people get to see the continual storyline, and I think that makes it a lot more interesting for fans, especially if they're watching older programs, old school stuff.
Yeah, definitely. And you had all that footage because I remember for a while people were saying, "Oh, the footage is lost," or "We can't find the footage." So you had all that
I don't
footage.
have all of it. I wish
Oh
I
no.
did
Okay.
have all of it. I have all of the Continental shows. I have all the USA shows, but I'm missing quite a few years. I don't have any Southeastern. I have one Continental, one Southeastern Knoxville show from 1978, and I've already put it on the YouTube channel. But I have there's probably no other Knoxville stuff. So Knoxville was over in 1979, and we went to Pensacola and started Southeastern there in Pensacola. And I have from about 1981 on in from Pensacola. So I haven't shown any of those yet, and I've been trying to find. I actually find some of these old shows so that I can keep them in order as much as possible.
Now, what happened to the missing tapes? Is it just like lost over time? Did somebody tape over it? Like, what happened to those missing
To the
footage?
original tapes,
Yeah.
well, I'll tell you what. What happened back in the old days, back in the '70s. Everybody used to tape over their shows.
That's what I
We
thought.
had the old 2-inch tapes back in those days. Big old canisters weighed about 75 pounds each, and you transported them around, bicycled them around from station to station. But wherever you produced your first show, when that show finished its bicycle, for instance, in Knoxville back in from '74 to '79, we had about 6 stations, and it would leave Knoxville. It would go to Johnson City, Tennessee. He would go to West Virginia, into Kentucky, and into a little station in Crossville, Tennessee, and eventually would come back to Knoxville. And then you would just tape over it again.
Right.
And, because back in those days, nobody ever expected wrestling to be as popular and to be as long lived as what it actually has turned out to be. And so there were a lot of tapes that, a lot of shows that not obviously we don't have at all. Nobody can find. And that's a shame. I'd give anything to have them because we were doing things back in those days that pretty remarkable and wasn't seen anywhere in the world. We were doing some crazy angles like I don't know if you've ever seen the block busting angle with Mongolian Stomper and Joe LeDuc.
No, I love those guys, but no.
Oh, I mean, we did some things that were just absolutely amazing, man. Those two guys wanted to really work an angle that would be memorable forever, and they came to me, and Joe LeDuc said to me, he says, "Ron, we want to break concrete blocks on our heads with a sledgehammer on TV." And I said, "You want to do what?" And then
Right. Yeah.
they told me, both of them, and both of them said, "Yeah, we really want to do this. We want to do it. We think we can do it." And I said, "I think you guys are going to get hurt. I mean, this sounds pretty dangerous." And anyway, we had the Mongolian Stomper, who was managed by Gorgeous George Jr. He did it first on one show, 1 week, came on, sat down in the middle of the ring, put a concrete block on his head. Gorgeous George Jr. got behind him with a sledgehammer, hit him in the top of the head with the concrete block with the sledgehammer. And I thought it hit his head. I thought it actually hit him in the head, the sledgehammer.
Right.
And he kind of shook his head off, and Gorgeous George helped him up. And so 2 weeks later, Joe LeDuc came back, and we put a bigger block on Joe LeDuc's head because it was an angle, and so obviously we wanted Stomper to prove that he could do it first, and then when Joe LeDuc sat down in the ring, Stomper went in the ring with Gorgeous George Jr. And Gorgeous George Jr. was going to hit him with the sledgehammer. And when Joe sat down, and they had a much bigger block, it was a cornerstone block. It probably weighed, I'm going to guess it weighed maybe 100 pounds. And he put that on his head. And when it came time for Gorgeous George Jr. to hit him with the sledgehammer, Stomper grabbed the sledgehammer, pushed Gorgeous George out of the way, and he hit Joe. And Joe actually really got hurt. He got hurt that day, and went to the hospital. He was actually in the hospital for about 5 days.
Wow.
And and it just it did exactly what I told him. I said, "I'm afraid you guys are going to get hurt," but they insisted they wanted to do it, and it was remarkable. We shot Joe LeDuc's doing it with a slow motion camera sitting on the apron. And it's just amazing, man. You showed that back in slow motion. And there was this was 1977 when this was happening. And nobody was doing that type of stuff in 77,
Yeah,
especially
that's kind
shooting
of
anything
freaky.
like that in slow motion. And, we did some pretty crazy stuff that, wow, it would have been priceless if you'd had it, if you'd had it today. There are some copies of that. There are some of those people that shot that stuff, that both those blockbusting things, and we'll be showing that on the Rewind station too, Southeastern Rewind.
Nice.
So
Joe LeDuc is pretty crazy.
luckily we do have that one.
Yeah, Joe LeDuc's pretty crazy. Well, Stomper is too, but LeDuc's pretty crazy.
Yeah, both of them pretty crazy. Both,
Oh.
those guys had matches together that were just unbelievable. Wow. They were crazy matches. I mean, I don't think there's ever been any bloodier matches than the matches those two had.
Did you always enjoy kind of promoting almost more than wrestling? Because it seems like the promotion game, even with the hockey stuff, seemed like that was kind of your bread and butter.
Yeah, I like to. Obviously I like to book, and I like to promote. I like because you own the company,
Hmm.
and that's a nice little benefit. I mean, Obviously, you make a lot more. Promoters and owners make a lot more than the wrestlers do, and I learned that pretty early from my dad and my granddad, both being in that position before me. And so, that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to not just be a wrestler. I wanted to own a company, and I wanted to run the shows. And wow, yeah, I mean that's what I really enjoyed. Hockey was and it was like the same thing in a way. I mean, we kind of made it a show in a way. We created our own opening for hockey, and really we changed hockey. We changed hockey, man. We started with a minor league team in Nashville, and we had a first game introduction ever done on ice. And wow, it just took off. I mean, she's now everybody in hockey does it. I mean,
Yep.
they've all got the show, but we had the very first one, and a lot of the hockey owners didn't like it. The NHL people didn't like it. They thought it was too much showmanship. And I kept telling the guys that complained, the NHL guys that would come and watch the games, they would want to come in and tell me, you can't do this, man. This isn't hockey. And I said, well, gee, so we're in Nashville, Tennessee. I said, a lot of these people don't know a damn thing about hockey. I said, we want to excite them. We want to give them something different. Because I said, until we can make hockey fans out of them, we need to entertain them.
Yep.
And so, yeah, I kind of got into not just promoting wrestling, but after I got out, hockey became that was a lot of fun too. It was great because we got to do so many things that had never ever been done in that sport.
It's almost like you brought pro wrestling to hockey.
We did. That's basically what it was. And the first time we did a game opening in Nashville, Tennessee, we darkened the building. The building went black. We had three spotlights, and they were all uh, just flying all over the crowd. We played Bad to the Bone. We introduced every player on the team. We did something that had never been done in hockey ever. The other team, they lined up across the blue line. They quit warming up because once we started to do the game introduction and the lights went out, they didn't know what was going on. They'd never seen anything like it. They lined
Right.
up along
Yeah.
the blue line, and we had a game introduction that just tore the house down. When I got involved in hockey, the first game I ever saw a live game, it was an East Coast League game. Players just skated out. There was no introduction of anybody. It was really dead. I was like, gosh, we can make a lot. We can change this and get fans at least into the game before it gets started. And that night we did it in Nashville, that first one. Wow, there wasn't an ass in the seats, man. I mean, everybody in that building was on their feet. And we did it every night. And next season, everybody in that league was doing it. And 3 seasons later, NHL was doing it. So, we had a lot of fun with hockey, doing a lot of things that never been done.
Yeah. Very cool. So, like your love of promoting, your love of wrestling, obviously it's a family business. Was that ingrained in you, or it's almost like, you got to be in the business, you know?
Yeah, kind of, in a way. I mean, when you grow up as a wrestler's son, you go and watch your dad wrestle. I watched my granddad wrestle a couple of times. He wrestled for 40 years, more than 40 years. I got to see him a couple of times, but I was only 5, 6 years old. Don't remember a lot of that. But when you grow up it'd be like being a football player's son or a basketball player's son. And you want to follow in your father's footsteps. And so Dad started training me and my brother to wrestle, to shoot. We learned how to really wrestle. We learned how to hurt guys and how to really what it was all about, the real side of wrestling. And then we got to go into the ring, and yeah, it was it's been a family business. I come from the oldest and the largest wrestling family in the world.
I think me and Kevin Sullivan were trying to figure out how many members, because there's like 20, right, of your
Yeah,
family
there's
that was in
there's
the
there's
business.
about 23 guys that wrestled, that refereed. A couple of them refereed. Most of them wrestled. me and my father and my grandfather, and then the Fields brothers. They promoted and owned their own companies. So I mean, we've in the southern United States, we probably well at one point my granddad ran wrestling in 12 states in the South back in the
Wow.
30s and 40s.
Wow. And then obviously Jimmy Golden, Bunkhouse Buck. I mean, there's so many others. And right, his son wrestles, I think. I mean, there's like just keeps going and going.
Yeah, yeah. Jimmy, yeah, great wrestler. His dad was a promoter and a referee. There's just a whole lot of family members that had a great life in wrestling until until it kind of changed it for everybody. Changed it for everybody dramatically, and it's a darn shame. It's changed so much so that there's a lot of people that sure gonna miss it for sure.
Yeah. I mean, like your brother is like old school to the bone. Like you just remember even his character in like WCW. Just remember, like it's cool, old school heel manager, but the psychology he works backstage, just it's completely different now. Even a character like him and even Bunkhouse Buck, you mean those guys are gone, long gone.
Yeah. Oh yeah. My brother, he was a manager in WCW. He managed Austin before he
Yep.
became Stone Cold. He managed a whole lot of guys. Heck, Ming was his bodyguard, and then he went on to WWE and managed uh, Jarrett, Jeff Jarrett, and
Yep.
Jimmy's done the Bunkhouse Buck out of for WCW and had done some things for WWE as well. And once I left in 1988 and retired from the wrestling part of it and got into hockey, I never went back and got involved until actually till about 4 or 5 years ago. Never had anything to do with wrestling, and then I've kind of worked my way back into being recognizable and having somewhat a name in the sport, and pretty amazing, I guess, in a way to make a comeback after 30 years of not being in the sport at all and not being heard from or anything to do with it, and coming back and being able to make a name for yourself there again. So, I've been kind of proud of that.
Yeah, that's amazing. But why gone 30 years though? Did you just get sick of the business or other ventures kind of took your time?
Yeah, hang on, I couldn't hear you. What was that?
Why gone for 30 years though?
Okay, I'm having a little trouble hearing you. I'm sorry.
Oh, why did you leave the business for 30 years?
Hang on. Okay, can try me again.
Why'd you like retire? Why'd you leave in 1988?
Okay, yeah, I would kind of. I'd been in the business for since 1974. I'd been in the business for 14 years, and I had run four different companies, built four different companies, and I kind of burned out. To be quite honest with you, I kind of burned out on it. That it's pretty hard not just to be a wrestler, but to own a company and make sure that your company runs properly and you got the right wrestlers and you're putting together these shows every week, and it's 52 weeks a year. There's no time, there's no off time. And after about 14 years of that, I said, I'm done. And then within less than 2 years, I kind of accidentally got into hockey, and I spent 6 years in that, and basically retired then for many years. Didn't do anything. Got into ADT. I got into the business world, and owned an ADT company in Tampa, Florida, and it turned out to be a big business for me as well. We were the 12th largest uh, franchise in North America for ADT.
Wow.
So, you
Damn.
know, just been lucky with business. I've had some good success. Thank the Lord.
Now going back into wrestling side and the wrestling business, it was a rumor at one point you're supposed to be NWA World Heavyweight Champion. When was that and is that true? Or actually, is that true first? And then when was that supposed to be, if it is true?
When I started wrestling, I played basketball at the University of Miami, and I started wrestling in 1970 in the state of Georgia. My dad owned he was one of the owners there for Georgia Championship Wrestling at that time. And then I went to Florida after that, and I had played basketball at the University of Miami. So I went down to Florida and stayed there from 1970 to 1974. And about 1973, Sam Muchnick, had kind of found out about me. I was making pretty much a pretty good name for myself pretty quickly in the sport. By 3 years in, I was winning. I was the Southern Heavyweight Champion, and I was winning championship belts. And Sam Muchnick out of St. Louis, who could get anybody he wanted, he told me, he called me up and said, Ron, I'd like to have you come and work in St. Louis for me. And so I spent about 2 years working in St. Louis on almost every St. Louis show, which was the biggest wrestling event anywhere in the world. Sam Muchnick could get wrestlers from any place he wanted, and every time you went there, you would see the biggest stars in wrestling. And I end up, getting to wrestle some of the greatest in St. Louis, and there was some talk that that they were considering me for NWA World Champion. Um, but I didn't put much stock in it. I really didn't. I didn't focus on wanting to do that, because I really didn't think that it was going to happen. Jack Briscoe had been the champion in Florida when I got there, and he ended up going to St. Louis in about 1971 and 72, and he ended up winning the world championship, obviously. Uh, so they thought that I would probably do the same thing. I think what happened in my case is I took a vacation in 1974, and I went to Knoxville, Tennessee from Florida. And I just by luck was watching a TV show. I spent a weekend there, and I was watching TV, and wrestling came on. And it was one of the worst wrestling program I ever saw. I was like, oh, this is horrible. I mean, gosh, I can't believe they're doing this. I mean, how are they making any money? And so I ended up becoming a promoter at 25 years old, probably the youngest person ever to own his first wrestling company. And I bought Knoxville, Tennessee, and I started Southeastern Wrestling. And that kind of took me out of the picture so far as being a champion was concerned. I mean, they talked to me about, there was a little talk about it. Ron, are you interested in the big belt? And I said, well, I don't know, not if I have to leave my company. So but yeah, I had opportunity. I had made a pretty good name for myself in the first 3-4 years in the sport. And once I started my own company, though, I never really wrestled for anybody else after that. A little bit in Georgia in the early '80s because I wanted to be on the satellite station, TBS, back in the day because I wanted that worldwide exposure. Because we were running shows in the '80s in the islands. I was running the Cayman Islands, and we were running out of Pensacola, and about 3-4 times a year, we would go down to the Cayman Islands and do these live events down there, and then other places in the Caribbean as well. So, we were doing a lot of traveling, and I was really lucky. I always had some great wrestlers, and a lot of young guys that went on to become real big stars that worked for me, and it's just I was really lucky, real lucky in my wrestling days.
So probably was the '70s, like the Briscoe era, Briscoe Funk era. That it was rumored that you were going to be champ, or thought about this champ. Then it would right about the '70s, mid
Yeah, the
'70s.
'70s. Yeah, Briscoe and Funk matches, things like that. 1970 in Florida, wrestling was tremendous. That was probably some of the best wrestling in the world at that time. Great talent in there. Bobby Shane, Buddy Colt, Johnny Valentine, Dusty Rhodes, Dick Murdoch. Jason went on and on and on. I mean, the Graham, Eddie was there. My dad was wrestling still in those days. Lester, my uncle, my granddad's brother Lester, he was still involved. There was just tremendous wrestling in Florida, and I had the opportunity to watch Jack Briscoe and Dory Funk Jr. many times. They had to me maybe the best of all time NWA championship matches because Junior was not just a big heel that went to throw a lot of punches and wanted to fight and not blood or any of that. They just went out and wrestled, and gosh almighty, they had unbelievable wrestling matches, just fantastic. All the guys in the dressing room would they would to line up the walls. I mean, when those matches were on, nobody left. All the young guys. You had Dick Slater. You had Bob Orton Jr. You had Bob Roop. You had Mike Graham. Wow, just a bunch of young stars, guys that's going to go on to be big stars. And we'd stand along the wall, man, and watch those two work. And wow, the matches were just unreal.
With you, it's funny because those matches are awesome, but it's funny like to see that you could have fit in there and could have been NWA champ. But I think Funk and Briscoe, you can still watch those matches today and great. I have old tapes that I converted to DVDs and stuff, and Funk and Briscoe NWA title matches are on there. Those matches are great still today.
Oh yeah, wow. I mean, yeah, they're classic. They're absolute classic wrestling matches. Because the traditionally these NWA champions, most of those heels were, they were the Terry Funk type. There was a totally different. Terry was a totally different guy in the ring than Junior was. Junior liked to wrestle. Terry liked to brawl. Terry liked to do it all. And but that Dory Funk Jr. era, and especially working with guys like Jack Briscoe, who was a you know, national champion. Hell, he only lost one match in his entire amateur career, I think. He was just a phenomenal wrestler, and to watch those guys, yeah. If people have never seen any matches between Dory Jr. and Jack Briscoe, they have the opportunity. Wow, I highly recommend. That's a good view.
And I like the real feud between the Funks and the Briscoes, especially over the title. Him not wanting to job to Briscoe, then his truck. Remember that whole incident on the
Right.
ranch. So very interesting stuff that adds to their feud.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, there's a lot more intrigue to that family
Yeah.
relationship, the two Funks and Jack Briscoe. And actually, I was in Australia in 1973. In January 1973, I was there with Austin Idol, who was Dennis McCord back in those days. Bob Roop out of Florida was on that same tour. And that was when they were supposed to switch the title to Jack. And I'd been there I was going to be there for 3 months. And when they didn't switch the title, Jack was scheduled to come to Australia anyway because he was going to be the champion. But so he came anyway, and then they brought me in the office in Australia, and they sent me back to Florida. They said, Ron, Jack's got to come here, and you're ready to be a star there. We're going to send you back to Florida to take Jack's place so that he can stay here he stayed longer than he was supposed to because he didn't have the belt. And they wanted to try to get past that. Uh, so that's the way they handled it. I went back to Florida, and they pushed me right on top. I won the Florida Championship, the Southern Championship. I mean, my career really took off about that point where Jack didn't get the belt. Kind of a strange way to get to the top, but kind of helped me in a way.
Right. Eventually, Jack does get it, but from Harley. So, I mean, that's even more intriguing because Harley's just a transitional champ at that point.
Yeah, yeah, he ended up getting it. Yeah, but he didn't beat Junior for it. I think he beat Harley for it.
Yeah,
I believe
exactly.
Harley
Yep.
beat Junior, and then he beat Harley, and he had his run, and then Terry beat him. So,
Yep.
all that. Boy, that's a great time frame there back in the '70s, and that time frame. That group of champions from Junior up through Harley. Wow, all those guys were really, really, really phenomenal talents.
Now, after Harley, obviously, is the Flair era, but you wrestled Rick for the title a few times, right?
Yeah, oh yeah. Rick and I wrestled. God, I don't know, maybe 20 championship matches over a 4 year period of time, 5 year period of time. Bob Armstrong was big in Continental and in our same company, part of our company, and Bob must have wrestled him another 20 times. And yeah, Rick's great, great in the ring, fantastic guy. I mean, wow, that NWA belt was carried by some really heavy duty dudes.
With Flair, I heard both in the ring and, behind the scenes and backstage and partying maybe outside, he would take over the territory quite literally. Is that true? He would become, Ric Flair, and everyone's following him to the clubs and going out to the bars with him. I mean, he would take over, right?
Oh yeah, Rick was a partier, man. And first time I ever met Rick was in St. Louis, and he was out of Carolina, and he came into St. Louis. He probably worked 3 shows. I didn't work with him on any of those shows, but and wow, what a partier he was. He was like crazy. And then when I got my Continental company going down there, he used to love to come in. He would stay a week, usually a week at a time, and he would take my heels out, the whole heel crew. And it was kind of like a joke between me and him. It wasn't too funny for me, but it was real funny for Rick. And he knew we made TV on Saturdays. We were doing our TV show out of Dothan, Alabama, and on Friday nights, whatever city we were in, he'd take all the heels and he'd get them all drunk, and he'd get them. Then the next day they'd be showing up for TV, and they'd be, oh wow, they were all dead, and vomiting and this, and I was like, wow. And then he would call me up. He knew the management of the TV station there. He would call the television station, and he would tell them to go get me. And then I would go and get the phone. And as soon as I got it, I knew who it was before I even got there. And as soon as I say hello, he'd say, "How'd they look, Ron? How did they do today?" Right? And I was like, "Oh, come on, man, Rick, you got to stop this." He would kamikaze. That was his drink. Rick liked to drink the kamikazes. And what was really funny is Arn. Arn was there during that time frame. And that's where Rick and Arn really got tied together, was during that Continental run where he was coming in quite a bit. And Arn would go with him. He was one of the guys he was young and he wanted to do everything that Flair did. And Flair was the big guy. He was the role
Yep.
model.
Yep.
And Arn caught him throwing his kamikazes. He wasn't drinking them. He would order everybody the kamikaze, and then he'd have them all. When they weren't watching, he'd take his kamikaze and throw it over his shoulder, right?
Yep. Yep.
And Arn caught him doing that. And Arn told me, he said, Ron, he said, he don't even drink the kamikazes. He goes, he just gets us all drunk, and he don't get really drunk. I said, what's that tell you, Arn? Oh, great! What a great! It was a great time for him, man. It was wonderful to be a wrestler back in those days.
That's great. Great story on Flair. And you're still buddies with Arn today, right? I see you guys doing
Oh
some shows
yeah,
together.
yeah. Still, yeah. And I've done the Super Stud cast with Arn, and yeah, Arn and I are real good friends, and a whole lot of guys. Gosh, a lot of guys that went on to be huge stars wrestled for me for years before they got to that level. Honky Tonk Man, Hulk Hogan. Wow, there's just a litany of big name people that we were able to descend on, move on to the big time. Uh, that got their start there. Arn Arn always used to tell me, and I think he always tells it probably today, is, it was his favorite place to ever work, was down there in that Pensacola area. Met his wife there. It's Arn's a great guy and a tremendous athlete, great wrestler.
A lot of guys love that territory for a lot of reasons. The woman, the weather, the payoffs, the less traveling. They love that territory.
Oh yeah, beach
Beach, yep.
right there, one of the most beautiful beaches in the country. Wow, gorgeous beach, and yeah, I was really lucky, And when I was in Knoxville years before that, I had the mountains. The mountains there were beautiful. They had all these lakes around Knoxville, still there. Some of the most beautiful lakes you'll ever see. Water's just crystal clear, and guys all own boats. And was lucky. Was in places where there was a lot more to be had than just the money, and guys really appreciate it. And the wonderful part about both of those places was the trips were short. And that's what really kept us in great talent, is because these guys would come and they'd be home by midnight every night, and they were making as much money as they made in big territories, in which they were driving $500 one way, 500 miles one way at night. Now they're driving 75 miles and making the same kind of money, and it was like, wow, just it was a great time frame, man, to be a wrestler, and so lucky to have the talent I had, man. The guys that came, I never, when we started in 1974, I never expected Southeastern and Knoxville to become a big territory. By 1977, we were probably the best small territory in the history of wrestling, period. And I got guys. I had a list of wrestlers, big name guys that wanted to come in that I could not even get in. Roddy Piper, I didn't even have room for Roddy Piper,
Wow.
and I regretted that about 5 years later in Georgia, when I was spending some time with him. I said, Roddy, I know I turned you down way back, man. I go, wow, I wish I'd have brought you in, man, but just it was a great time to be a wrestler.
And I feel like, especially Continental, the Armstrongs and the Fullers is something that is so synonymous with that area. What is it about the chemistry of you guys? Because that was just one of the greatest feuds, and it seemed like never ending.
Yeah, I mean, it was a great time frame. Bob's boys, he had four sons. Three of them were about the same age, and those guys, they were they were just tremendous workers. Brad was the first son that got in the ring, and gosh, for anybody that ever saw a kid wrestle, I mean, everybody, so many people say Brad Armstrong is one of the greatest workers of all time, and I really truly believe that. And I had a brother, I had a cousin, Jimmy, who was a great worker too, and we worked an angle in 1982 in Mobile, and Bob had never been a heel in his entire career. And I told him, I said, Bob, you got Brad, you got Scott, you got Steve. I said, all of you guys are in the ring. I said, you got me, you got Rob, I got Jimmy. I said, your family against my family. And we started talking about, how the heck do we get there? And, then we had this world championship match with Ric Flair coming up, and we had a tournament the week before the championship match, and me and Bob Armstrong were both baby faces, and Bob had never healed in his life. I hadn't healed for many years at that point. I was a baby face, and we ended up in the finals of a tournament, and we wrestled each other. I beat him. We didn't fight. Wasn't a punch thrown. We had a 30-minute wrestling match in the finals of a tournament. Uh, I won the match. Bob went on TV with me the next week before we went to Flair, the match with Flair, and he came out and says, Ron, he says, I think you're going to win the world championship. He goes, I just want to be in the ring when it happens. He says, would you mind if I refereed this match with Flair? And he said, I don't care what Flair says, but would you mind? We've been friends for years. He says, you're going to win the world title. I know you are. I want to be the man to raise your hand. And I said, heck yeah, man, I'd love to have you. Well, we had a huge crowd. Wow. And then Bob turned heel that night. And after that, we had the longest run, the longest family feud in wrestling history, undoubtedly. That was 1982. In 1988, we were still at it. You know, we I, Bob turned heel, and then he came back, and he and I got back together. I took him back as a partner, and then I turned on him, and then Jimmy got involved with me, and we worked for years. We worked angles. We sold out city after city, just a family feud. It's it was a magical. I mean, it like never would end. We just kept coming up with angles and ideas, and wow, the crowd just loved it. They were into it. His family was so great. They were all great workers, and Rob and Jimmy and I, we could do the heel deal really well too, and so it worked out to be a good thing. We actually ended up both being baby faces at the end of all of it, the whole group of us. And then we worked with a whole bunch of different heels. So, it was a great time period for us. And it was a great time period for wrestling. That's one of the beautiful things about the Continental shows that I'm doing that's on the Southeastern Rewind YouTube channel is they're the actual shows. People get the chance to see the entire angle, basically, from 1982, where Bob turned heel. We're going to be going back to that when we get to showing these southeastern shows before we turn it into Continental, and they'll be able to see the whole thing, which is pretty remarkable, man. It's a great journey. I enjoy watching them myself. I go, wow, I forgot how good some of this stuff was.
And I think you said it, all the kids are like a little bit of Bob. Like Brian, the road dog, got the talking. Steve got the technical ability. Scotty got the brawling, and then the all around great worker was Brad. But you combine all four of them, and that's Bullet Bob.
Yeah, oh yeah. I mean, the boys were so talented, all of them, every one of them, and they all had something a little bit different about them too, which really made it work. Brad could do it all. Brad finally became a great talker too. Like you said, Road Dogg was a great talker. Brian was a tremendous talker. Scott was a great little worker. He had the best super kick I ever saw. And Steve was actually the strongest of the whole group of sons, and Steve was great too. So it was working with those guys was a pleasure, and it was so easy.
And hey, you're making money. The feud can just go on forever, or you guys can just keep
Yeah,
making money.
yeah, yeah, and it seemed like it did. It went on forever. We just kept, we'd turn heel, then they'd turn heel, and we'd go back and then back and forth and back and forth, and wow, it was a beautiful time.
One thing that I had to bring up to you was Plan B. And obviously this we're going back to the late 70s, I guess really early 80s. Plan B in Knoxville. What was the deal? What happened there with Garvin and Roop and Orton and Malenko?
Uh, we had in 1979 we had what I call the Knoxville War, uh, and those guys decided that they want to run their own company. They wanted to break off from my company, and so they started their own little company. They had their own television, and toward the end of 1979, I sold out. I sold to my part of Southeastern. I sold my Southeastern Knoxville company to Jim Barnett out of Atlanta, and then that's when I went down to Southeastern full time in Pensacola, and we built that one from there on. But those guys were there for about 6 months, running their own TV, trying to compete. And then toward the end, they realized that they weren't going to be able to win, and they made they, they made these videos, and they actually, they were so they were so poor losers, kind of in a way that they weren't able to take the territory over and to be successful, and they were about to have to shut down, and they had the Plan B. I think that was the name of what they called it too. And Plan B was, we're going to just go out and tell everybody, we're going to break kayfabe. We're going to tell everybody how the business is run and exactly what it's all about. And they shot this video. All of them did probably 2 or 3, some of them maybe as much as 5 minutes long, explaining how you did the angles and explaining everything about the business. And that tape didn't ever show up for many, many years. And I came back into wrestling, I guess about 5 years ago when I started doing the Studcast. And some guy called me and he said, "Ron, have you ever seen these videos of the 5 guys from the Knoxville War that outed the business, that just told everything about it?" I said, "What are you talking about?" And he goes, "You haven't ever seen it?" And I said, "No, what are you talking about?" And the guy sent them to me. And so, wow, I mean, it was like, for anybody that never seen it, it's a remarkable piece of film, man. All of that stuff. If that had gotten out in 1979, with wrestling being as popular as it was around the world, and those guys were pretty reputable guys, pretty big name guys. It wasn't like somebody that was unknown and that was just mad at the business or whatever. They their names and their reputation had a little bit of clout to it. And if that had ever got played, those videos, it would have really affected the future of wrestling back from 1979 on.
Yeah, would have killed the business, killed kayfabe, right? Garvin and Roop and Orton. I guess Ron Wright was the other guy, and Boris Malenko, right? Those 5.
Yeah, it was Roop and Orton, Garvin, Ron Wright, and Malenko, Boris Malenko.
And they just did it because they're being sore losers, basically.
Yeah, they saw that they weren't going to be able to win the war, and they wanted to kill the business. I think maybe they were planning on maybe using it to. They could have blackmailed entire companies if they had wanted to. They could have done. There were so many territories that were big at that point and doing great business, and they could have sent these tapes and said, "Look, we're gonna show these tapes unless you send us some money." I don't know what their plan was. Thank God they never got out there, and it never happened that way.
Now, as we head towards the wind down, head towards the finish, where could we find, all the information, all the studcast, everything you got going on with the podcast and everything else?
Where did I find Hogan?
No, no. Where can we find all your podcast
Oh,
information, all
okay.
your stuff?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, obviously, I do a studcast every week. It's called Ron Fuller Studcast. You can find that on all podcast outlets. And I've been doing that for, more than 4 years, 233 episodes, probably another 300 episodes to come before I get to the end of my wrestling career, doing it the way I do it, a week at a time. Uh, and You can find that all podcast outlets. I have a website, TN Stud, Tennessee, short for Tennessee, tnstud.com. And everything's on there. The Studcasts are on there. Super Studcasts are on there. Uh, you know, a big, nice gallery, a whole stud store where I sell souvenir things and stuff like that. And I have a YouTube channel. It's a Southeastern Rewind, and right now it's just in its infancy. Basically, I think we've been on for about 6 months now, and we're beginning to get some pretty big audience. And we've got Continental on there now. We've got USA on there, which was another company that was Bob Armstrong and Mongolian Stomper and uh, uh, the RPMs. Scott Armstrong, Nelson Royal was on there a lot. Uh, just a whole lot of great talent on that show. It's on there, and we're about to start putting on the old Southeasterns from Pensacola, starting in the early '80s. So fans will be able to find just about. You have to talk about old school. It's all old school. I do a whole lot of things on there myself that I record. I've got a series on there of I wrestled 11 NWA World Champions. They're called Stud Stories, and the series is on the NWA champions. And I talk about not just my matches with them, but my history with those guys, and tell stories about them too on each one of those. So we've got a lot of other things on there as well, but it's really doing well. Get quite a few subscribers, and anybody that wants to see some really good old school, you need to go and take a look at it. I think you find it to be very interesting.
And your book too, right? You wrote a book.
Yeah, I have a book. Yeah, I sure do. And oddly enough, it's not about wrestling. I wrote a book in the late '90s when I was totally retired. I lived in the mountains here too in Tennessee, and I wrote a book about a lion getting loose in the Smoky Mountains National Park. And gosh, man, I'm not a writer, but the book it's a great one. I mean, I've sold a lot of books, and people really love it. They say a lot of people say it's another Jaws. Some people say it's better than Jaws. So,
Wow.
I mean, I don't know that, but it's a great book, and it's on the website. You can go to tnstud.com and get it there, and it's on Amazon too. Amazon Brutus is the name of the book. Amazon Brutus novel. You can find it there. Read the reviews. I probably got 75 5-star reviews at least. So it's been a real trip, man. Wrestling, hockey, ADT, book. I mean, I've had a pretty decent life.
Yeah, I was going to say you could do it all. You can write a book, promote hockey, wrestling, almost be NWA champion. You're working ADT. I mean, what a life! What a career!
Yeah, it's been a great ride. You know, being an old Tennessee stud, having that nickname, and having been around horses a lot, man, it's been a great ride. I'd have to say that.
Awesome, great stuff, Mr. Fuller. Thank you so much for all the time. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. Nice seeing you again.
Yes, you too. Thank you so much.